You have a wide angle lens. It may not be a 10 to 20 like this one, but it's a wide angle lens. And you've got a problem. Your lens is causing you some big issues, big time issues. You may be a nature and wildlife photographer. You may be a people photographer. You may be a commercial photographer. You're doing real estate and you've got issues. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about what your wide angle lens is doing to your pictures and how you can get around that. First of all, who am I? My name is Mike Patterson, and I'm a professional full-time photographer located here in southern Alberta, Canada. I run a photo studio as well as I run a full-service photo lab, and I've been doing this for over 39 years. And I hear constantly from customers coming in to get stuff printed or customers coming in to ask me questions about why their pictures look funny that people are shooting with wide-angle lenses and they're having big trouble. Now, I've been trying to think of what to call this video. Your lens makes you look fat. Your lens is warping things. You're from the twilight zone. It's when people come in, they don't know how to tell me or how to ask about what's wrong with their picture. Sometimes they don't notice until I print it. And then they look at it and they go, something doesn't look right. And they'll constantly be saying, we can't really... It's not, what, do you see it? And I have to say, yes, I do see it. And here's why. So what is it? If you're shooting with a wide angle lens, and by wide angle, I mean any lens that's less than 50 millimeters as a guideline. So 49 millimeters, 40 millimeters, 30 millimeters, 20 millimeters, 10 millimeters. If you're shooting with a wider angle lens, what happens is that on the edges specifically, more so than the center, it warps things. And if somebody's unfortunate enough to be on that edge, they get warped. And I've heard it constantly. Does my daughter-in-law look fat? Does my son-in-law look short? Does my grandson look weird? Like, it's just... And people come in all the time asking, like, what's wrong with it? My husband took these pictures. A professional photographer took these pictures. And they just don't know what's wrong with their pictures. But there's something wrong with them. And it comes from the lens. Now, little bunny trail here. When I'm talking a 50 millimeter lens or wider, so less, smaller number, I'm talking about either a 50 millimeter lens put on a full frame camera, or if you're using a crop sensor, a APS size sensor, which most people are, we're talking around the 30 to 35 millimeter range or wider because there's a crop factor. If you're using a crop sensor camera, if it's a Nikon, you times the lens millimeters by 1.4. If it's a Canon, you times it by 1.6. If it's a crop sensor, other manufacturers are different numbers depending upon the camera. If it's wider than that 50 millimeters, that's where the problems start. If it's really wide, that's where the problems really escalate and magnify themselves. And a lot of times people don't notice it until that one picture that all of a sudden sets them off. And then they go, yeah, look at all of them. It may be a picture of somebody sitting on the floor with their feet out in front of them. And somebody has a wide angle lens, gets in close, takes a picture, and the feet look 4 feet tall. But the person looks 2 feet tall. It's distorted. Or a person's on the edge and their head looks weird. Or their whole body looks weird. Now, for me, I used to deal with this constantly. And I mean constantly. Locally here in Lethbridge, we have these seniors' homes. Very nice condos. And I often get a phone call that goes just like this. Hi, my parents or my grandparents are having a special event. 50th anniversary, 60th anniversary, something like that. And they would like you to come over and take some pictures of them at this event, some formal pictures so they can give out to the family. And there's a beautiful library here that you can take the pictures in. And I hear this constantly. Now, the library, let's describe the library really quickly here. The library is the size of an average living room, about the size of this room. It's about 8 feet wide by maybe 10 or 12 feet long. It's quite nice. Fireplace at one end, window at the other end, books on the side, couple nice chairs. It works perfect for doing 1 or 2 people portraits. I can go in there with my 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 millimeter lens and take some beautiful pictures depending upon what the client wants for cropping and stuff. It works great. And I always tell them when they phone, no problem. I can do your parents in that room, no problem. And how about the kids too? How many kids? 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids? Yep, that will work. I said, but I can't go any more than that. So I can't do the spouses in that room. And I definitely can't do extended family. And they go, okay, we understand. So I'll go over there, I'll take the pictures. Yep, we got the couple. Yep, we got the kids. And all of a sudden somebody will say, let's do the entire family. And I'll say, nope, we can't do that. Now, in the past, I would give in and I would move back as far as I could. I would get my super wide lens. We would cram 35 people into that room, kids on the floor and people all over the place, and squish them in because they wanted to do the picture in only that room, and would take the picture. And then within a week or two, somebody would phone me and they would say, we like all the pictures except that group picture. And the people on the edges, they look, well, my daughter's been crying for a week because she looks so fat in the picture. Or my son's really concerned because he looks like he has a broken back. He looks like he has a stomach on him. Looks like a dad bod. Like something's not right here with these pictures. And I'll tell them, remember we had discussed this ahead of time? Remember when I was doing the pictures, I told you that they would look like this? Remember I told your brother when he phoned me that this would happen? Remember I dropped off a piece of paper that actually discussed that because I knew you were going to ask for that group. And so after we did it, I handed you that piece of paper so that you would know what these pictures would look like. Well, yeah, but can't you fix them? Now, another bunny trail here. Can they be fixed afterwards? To an extent, they can. You have the ability in Photoshop, in Lightroom, if you use ACD, SEE, one of their programs, you can fix it in there. And you can go in and change the perspective. So you can straighten things out and you can twist things and you can do different things. Some are automatic. You can put in the lens and it'll fix it automatically for you. But it never looks quite right. It just doesn't look quite right. It tries really hard. And can it improve it? It can improve it a lot. But it doesn't do 100% job. It just doesn't. It may on one picture and then the next picture it doesn't. If you're an amateur photographer and you're shooting 1 picture or 2 pictures and you want to adjust it and everything, you may be able to get a good picture out of it. If you're a professional photographer and you're shooting 500 pictures of a family, if you're shooting 1,000 or 2,000 pictures at a wedding, it's just way too time consuming to go through and make sure everyone has been adjusted. So what can you do? What is the solution? Buy a mirrorless camera? Buy a better lens? Maybe it's because you have a Sigma 10-20. Maybe you should have the Canon 10-20. Maybe that's different. No. Maybe you should buy a more expensive camera. No. The solution is this, and it's a pretty simple solution. You should not shoot below 50 millimeters unless you want some distortion. Pretty simple. Now, I know people are going to argue with me. I get it all the time where they say, well, actually, you can shoot to 41 millimeters and the distortion factor is 0.7289.3%, which is hardly visible to the human eye. Yeah, let's just go with 50 millimeters, okay? I get weird comments all the time from people. Like, oh, a wide-angle lens actually doesn't distort. It's a perspective on the camera that's an angle of the dependent of. No. If you go below 50 millimeters, expect some distortion. If you have people on the edge of your pictures, especially below 50 millimeters, you're going to notice more distortion. So that's people. What about nature and wildlife? It happens in that too. The good thing about nature and wildlife is if you're shooting a waterfall and you use a 10 millimeter lens, there's going to be distortion there, but chances of you seeing it is slim to none unless you have something that runs vertical or horizontal that you know is vertical or horizontal. Perfect example. A number of years ago, a developer called me and says, Mike, we need you to go take some pictures of this property. I said, okay. We need this picture to be as wide as possible. It's okay. We need this and this and this shown. I said, yep, no problem. So I drove out there. I took a picture with my 10 millimeter lens. The problem was there was a fence and there was some power poles. And the power poles on the edge looked weird. And the fence on the edge looked weird. And down at the bottom, it looked weird. Now, my client didn't care, absolutely didn't care. All they needed was an overview, and they had tried it with their camera, and they didn't have a 10 millimeter lens, and they struggled. They just couldn't get it. My 10 millimeter lens was more than enough. But, and here's the thing, I could not stand it. I could not send that picture to the client. I just could not do it. So what did I end up doing? I ended up making a panoramic using a 50 millimeter lens, and I shot a bunch. We stitched it together. I gave it to them. The power poles were perfectly vertical, and it worked out perfectly. And they loved it, and they got their approval. They did the development and everything, and yeah, it made them a lot of money. So what can you do if you want a wide angle shot or a wider angle shot? And, well, you want it. Well, if you're doing it repeatedly, if you're doing it all the time, you can buy what's called a tilt shift lens. And this is a wider angle lens which allows you to twist and turn things so that you're getting verticals and horizontals which are perfectly square. But it's expensive. It's a lot of money. And honestly, you're not going to use it during weddings and so on and so forth. It's just not going to happen. But it's a nice lens. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful lens. And if anybody wants to send me one, I'd love to have one. But I just can't justify one for myself for a little bit that I use it. So what else can you do? Well, don't shoot below 50 millimeters. Pretty simple. Keep your lens at 50 millimeters. Don't go wider if the distortion is going to be an issue with you. Move back. Instead of sitting there and zooming out, go back if you can. Change locations. This is something I see a lot in wedding pictures. People will go to a location and they don't want to be too far back, so they put on a wide angle lens and everything is distorted. The bride looks wider than she is taller. The groom looks funny. The in-laws look, somebody gets distorted. So just don't use it. But what happens if you want something more panoramic? What happens if you want something wider? What happens if, well, you can't afford to tilt and shift, but you can't move back any further? Shoot a panoramic with your camera, but make sure, again, that you're not shooting below 50 millimeters. Take a bunch of pictures, vertically or horizontally, and have your program stitch them afterwards. Now, why don't you want to use anything wider than 50 millimeters? Because if you're shooting a bunch of pictures lower than 50 millimeters and you try to stitch them together, you'll have some warpy, wavy things where each edge joins. So you don't want to do that if you're shooting panoramics. You want to keep it at 50 millimeters or 60 millimeters. That'll get you a lot nicer pictures. So until next time, have a great day. Get out there and take some pictures and have a great time doing it. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.